The sound of running water echoed through the walls as I passed by my 65-year-old neighbor's bathroom. I hadn't planned to stop, but something about that moment made me pause. Before I knew it, I'd said something that would change everything. It all began on a quiet evening, the kind where the city feels half asleep. The distant hum of traffic was barely audible, and the soft whir of my fridge filled the silence of my apartment. I had just returned from work, after another long day staring at a screen, fighting off fatigue and boredom. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, painting a faint orange glow across the sky. My plan was simple, a quiet night. Maybe a quick dinner, a beer or two, and then collapsing into bed to recover from the week. But I had no idea that my peaceful evening was about to take an unexpected turn. Just as I was about to pour myself a drink, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of rushing water. It was strange, almost out of place, and louder than usual. Something about it made me stop in my tracks. It wasn't the familiar gurgle of my own apartment's pipes. No. This sound was coming from next door, from the apartment of Mr. Butler, my elderly neighbor. I paused, listening carefully, trying to make sense of it. Mr. Butler had lived next door for as long as I could remember. He wasn't someone I worried about often. A quiet man, always kind but distant, polite but reserved. He had lived alone ever since his wife passed away a few years ago. From what I knew, he didn't have much family left. Most of the time, he kept to himself. The last time I'd spoken to him was just a few days earlier, when we exchanged a quick hello in the hallway. He'd mentioned something about taking a long bath, saying he'd earned it after a particularly rough week. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now, hearing that water pounding through the walls, I wasn't so sure. He had mentioned taking a long bath, saying he'd earned it after a particularly rough week. It was hard to imagine what could possibly stress someone his age, but that night the water was different, louder, far too loud. It didn't sound like a normal shower running. There was something about it, a force, a pressure, as if water was pouring through the pipes in a relentless, almost violent rush. I had never heard anything like it before, and it made me uneasy. I listened closely. Underneath the crashing water, I could hear something else, a faint, muffled sound. Shuffling, maybe? I couldn't tell for sure, but something wasn't right. Mr. Butler had always been a creature of habit, calm, quiet, never one to make a fuss. Why the sudden flood of water? And why couldn't I hear him at all? Instinctively, I grabbed my phone and dialed his number. It rang several times, but there was no answer. My concern deepened. Before I could second-guess myself, I slipped on my jacket, grabbed my keys, and stepped out into the hallway. The corridor was dimly lit, the yellow bulbs flickering faintly. As I approached Mr. Butler's door, the sound of rushing water grew even louder. And now, mixed in with it, I thought I heard something else, a faint hum or maybe a murmur. I knocked, once, twice, 3 times. My knuckles hit the wood, but no response came, just the steady roar of water through the pipes. "Mr. Butler?" I called, pressing my ear to the door. Nothing. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise itself. Hesitantly, I tried the handle, and to my surprise, the door creaked open. "Mr. Butler?" I called again, stepping inside carefully. My shoes made soft thuds on the wooden floor. I wasn't sure if I was intruding, but something inside me said this wasn't right. The air was thick with steam, almost suffocating. The sound of rushing water grew even stronger the farther I walked. Down the narrow hallway, the carpet muted my footsteps. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, and through the fogged glass, I could just make out the faint outline of Mr. Butler's silhouette. Through the fogged-up glass, I called again, my voice louder now, trying to rise above the drumming of the water. "Mr. Butler!" Still, there was no response. It was strange. I'd known Mr. Butler for years, and he always answered a knock, even if only with a quick word or a nod. I hesitated, my hand hovering near the door handle. Something deep inside told me I had to make sure he was all right, no matter how awkward it might feel. Slowly, I pushed the door open. My heart pounded faster with every step. The bathroom was wrapped in mist. the steam so thick I could barely see anything at first. But as my eyes adjusted, I finally saw him. Mr. Butler stood beneath the steady stream of water, his face half turned toward the wall. Water poured down around him, splattering across the tiles, but he didn't move. He stood perfectly still, as if lost in thought or trapped in another world entirely. "Mr. Butler, are you okay?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. His head turned just a little, almost as if he'd heard me, but he didn't respond. He remained there, motionless, silent. Confusion and worry twisted inside me. Why wasn't he saying anything? I stepped closer, now standing near the edge of the shower. Through the haze of steam, I could just make out the faint outline of his face. Something about his expression felt off. His eyes were half open, his mouth slightly parted, yet there was no sign of awareness. "Mr. Butler?" I said again, this time firmer, hoping to bring him back to himself. Then, slowly, almost mechanically, he turned his head fully toward me. I froze. Our eyes met. For a brief second, I thought I saw recognition flicker there. But something about his gaze unsettled me. It wasn't the calm, distant kindness I was used to. There was something different, something that didn't belong. His eyes seemed sharper now, intense in a way that caught me off guard. My pulse quickened, and I froze where I stood, unsure whether to leave or try speaking again. Then I noticed something else. His expression. It wasn't anger or confusion, but something far more complicated. It felt as if he was trying to recognize me, to understand why I was there. The way he looked at me made my chest tighten with unease. "Clara," he said finally. His voice was low and rough, as if he hadn't spoken in hours. "Are you okay?" I asked softly, barely above a whisper. His gaze flickered for a moment, a faint light passing behind his eyes before he managed a small smile, one that didn't quite reach his face. "I'm fine, Clara," he said quietly. "Just enjoying my bath." Something about the way he said it didn't sit right. It wasn't the words themselves, and it was the tone. There was a strange distance in it, like he wasn't fully present. The steam swirled thickly around us, and for a moment, the world outside that small bathroom seemed to fade away. The sound of water filled my ears, loud and unending. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Something deeper was going on, something I couldn't yet see. When Mr. Butler turned his head again, time seemed to pause. Our eyes met through the haze, and for a brief instant, I thought I saw something flicker in them. Something deep, tired, and almost pleading. Then it was gone. He gave a calm, familiar smile, the kind I had always known. "I'm fine, Clara," he repeated, his voice gentler this time. "Don't worry about me." But despite his reassurance, a heavy silence filled the room. It wasn't like Mr. Butler to act so distant, so detached. Even after years of living next door, I couldn't remember a moment when he had seemed so far away. Not in distance, but in spirit, and standing there, surrounded by the sound of rushing water, I realized something had changed. Though I couldn't yet tell what. He had never looked at me with such intensity before. "I just heard the water and thought something might have happened," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I expected. Even as I spoke, I wasn't sure I believed my own words. The rushing water, the strange noises I'd heard earlier, none of it added up, but it wasn't really my business. Was it? Mr. Butler just nodded, still standing beneath the stream. His expression remained unreadable. There was a tension in the air, subtle but heavy, like something unseen pressing between us. I couldn't explain it, but I could feel it. "I should probably go," I muttered, not sure whether I was speaking to him or just to myself, but for some reason I didn't move. My feet felt heavy, rooted to the spot, as if I were waiting for him to say something more, something that might make sense of it all. "You're always welcome here, Clara," he said softly. His voice was unusually warm, calm, almost too calm. "You don't have to leave so soon." The words lingered in the steam-filled air. I couldn't quite read his tone. It wasn't unkind, but it carried something unfamiliar. something I couldn't name. Mr. Butler had always been polite, a quiet presence in the building, but never personal, never like this. I nodded slowly. Okay, well, I'll leave you to it then. Enjoy your bath, Mr. Butler. Turning away, I stepped into the hallway. My footsteps echoed softly against the wooden floor. The moment I closed his door behind me, I exhaled, a long breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Back in my own apartment, everything felt off. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself it was nothing, just an odd moment, a misunderstanding, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. The image of him standing there under the water kept replaying in my head, still, silent, distant. There had been something in his eyes, something that didn't belong. I told myself to forget it. People have strange days. Maybe he was just tired or lost in thought, but deep down, a quiet unease stirred, a feeling that something wasn't right. And no matter how much I tried to ignore it, that feeling refused to fade. I couldn't shake the image of the way his eyes had met mine, that strange, unreadable smile. It stayed with me, looping in my thoughts like a scene I couldn't stop replaying. Something about that night refused to leave me. I kept trying to tell myself it was nothing, just a strange moment between neighbors, but the feeling lingered. For days it was there, quiet, but persistent. Every time I passed his door, a thought would surface uninvited. Was he okay? What really happened that night? I kept thinking about Mr. Butler, about the look in his eyes, the way he had seemed both distant and present at the same time. It was as if something had shifted between us, something I didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Before long, I found myself standing outside his apartment again, hand raised, knocking softly on the door. The last time I'd done this, it had been simple, just checking on him. But this time there was something else behind it. Curiosity, concern, maybe both. After a few seconds, the door opened. Mr. Butler stood there in his usual faded robe, but somehow he looked different. Maybe it was the light, or maybe it was me, but his expression seemed softer, almost relieved. "Clara," he said warmly, as though he'd been expecting me. "How are you?" "I'm good," I said, my words stumbling slightly. "I just wanted to check in after the other night. The water sounded strange again, and I thought..." He smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes this time. "Come in," he said kindly. "I was just making some tea. Could use the company." I hesitated. A part of me whispered that I should leave, that this was crossing some kind of line, but another part, the part that wanted answers, urged me to stay. I stepped inside. Warmth wrapped around me instantly. His apartment was small but inviting, bookshelves crowded with old novels, a worn sofa, framed photographs of places I didn't recognize. The faint scent of something sweet drifted from the kitchen, probably the tea he was brewing. "Sit down." "Clara," Mr. Butler said, motioning toward the old armchair by the window. I nodded and took a seat, my mind racing with unspoken questions. "Make yourself at home," he said, motioning toward the chair in the corner. I nodded and sank into it, the soft fabric creaking beneath me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air felt heavy, quiet but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that carried something unspoken beneath it, something waiting to be noticed. Mr. Butler poured the tea carefully, then handed me a mug. "I'm glad you stopped by," he said softly. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on mine. For the first time, I noticed how dark his eyes really were. Deep, focused, almost searching. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, just intense, like he was trying to read a thought I hadn't spoken yet. I took a small sip of tea. It was too hot, but I needed the distraction. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I don't know why, but it felt like I should come by." He nodded slightly, the faintest hint of a smile on his face. For a long moment, we sat there in silence, the clock ticking somewhere in the background, the faint sound of the city outside muffled by the walls. There was a strange stillness to him. He didn't fidget, didn't look away. He just watched, calm, quiet, thoughtful. And yet, something in his gaze carried a weight I couldn't ignore. My pulse quickened, and I tried to steady myself with another sip of tea. But every time I looked up, his eyes were already there, meeting mine. It wasn't threatening, not exactly. It was more like he was trying to understand me, to uncover something I didn't even realize was there. After what felt like forever, he finally spoke. "You've been different lately," Mr. Butler said, his voice low but steady. The words caught me off guard. There was something deliberate about them, not just an observation, but a question hidden inside. I blinked. "Different? How do you mean?" He tilted his head slightly, studying me. "Just quieter, more distant. Like something's been on your mind." His tone wasn't accusing. It was gentle, curious. Still, it made my chest tighten. Because he wasn't wrong. Something had been on my mind. I just didn't know how to explain what it was, or why it felt connected to him. It felt like he was trying to uncover something buried beneath the surface. Something even I hadn't realized was there. I don't know," I began, but my voice faltered. I didn't know how to explain the strange mix of emotions building inside me. The pull I felt every time I was near him, the confusion that had lingered since that night. It wasn't attraction, not really. It was something else, something deeper, harder to name. Before I could gather my thoughts, Mr. Butler set his cup down and slowly stood. His movements were calm, deliberate, but they carried a quiet intensity that filled the room. He took a few steps closer, not threatening, but focused, like he wanted to make sure I was really listening. "Clara," he said quietly, his voice steady. "You're not just here for tea, are you?" The question hung in the air. I froze, unsure how to answer. I didn't know what I was here for. Concern, curiosity, maybe both. My heart raced, but not from fear, from uncertainty. There was something in the way he looked at me, something that felt both searching and heavy with unspoken meaning. "I just wanted to understand," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. His expression softened then, the intensity fading from his eyes. He nodded slowly, almost as if he understood more than I'd said. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Full of questions, of unspoken thoughts neither of us knew how to put into words. My pulse quickened sharply. He was close now, close enough that I could feel the air shift between us. For a second, I thought he might step back, say something, end this strange tension that had been building for so long. But instead, he just stood there, silent, searching. It wasn't about distance anymore. It was about something else, something neither of us had words for. It felt like the moment when a storm is about to break, quiet, heavy, electric. All the emotions I had been pushing down rose to the surface: confusion, longing, fear, and something deeper I couldn't quite name. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. My thoughts were tangled, my heartbeat too loud in my ears. He looked at me, eyes filled with questions. It was as if he could see straight through me, past all the things I tried to hide. For a moment, the world outside that small room disappeared. There were no sounds, no clocks ticking, no rain against the window, only that strange, quiet connection neither of us could explain. And then, almost as suddenly as it began, he stepped back, breaking the spell. The air seemed lighter, but the moment lingered, like an echo that refused to fade. I exhaled slowly, my thoughts still racing. Whatever had just happened between us wasn't simple, and it wasn't something either of us could easily forget. The silence that followed said everything words could not. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe the channel for more powerful and thought-provoking stories. Thanks for listening.